The silent observers, the maintenance bay of research station Kepler 442b, hummed with the steady drone of life support systems. But maintenance technician Zara Volkov barely noticed anymore. She'd been assigned to this godforsaken moon for 8 months now, fixing air filters and cleaning ventilation shafts, while the real scientists did their important work in the restricted levels below. Corporate said it was a xenobiology research station studying potentially hazardous specimens recovered from a derelict ship near the Vega system. Zara had never questioned it until tonight. The service tunnel she was crawling through opened into an observation corridor she'd never seen before. Through reinforced windows, she glimpsed something that made her blood freeze. 2 massive cylindrical containment pods dominated the sterile chamber below, each filled with a translucent blue gel. And floating inside each pod was a small humanoid figure. Children. They looked like children. The beings were no taller than human 10-year-olds, with elongated limbs and smooth, pale skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Delicate. Features suggested intelligence, not the monstrous threat she'd expected from all the security protocols. Most striking were the patterns of soft bioluminescence that pulsed gently beneath their skin, blues, greens, and purples that seemed to shift with some unknown rhythm. Dr. Marcus Thorne stood before the pods with his assistant, reviewing data on a tablet. Subject 1's neural activity remains elevated, he said coldly. Increase the sedative levels. We can't have them disrupting the scans again. But, sir, the assistant hesitated, the readings suggest they're experiencing significant psychological distress. Perhaps if we... They're specimens, Dr. Reeves, Thorne cut her off, not patients. Their comfort is irrelevant to our research objectives. Zara watched in horror as additional chemicals were injected into the pods. The children's bioluminescent patterns immediately dimmed, their movements becoming sluggish. But before the sedatives fully took hold, something extraordinary happened. The 2 beings, separated by meters of space and reinforced barriers, began to pulse in perfect synchronization. Their lights flickered in rapid sequences, complex patterns that looked almost like communication. Dr. Reeves noticed too. Sir, are you seeing this? The synchronous bioluminescent activity suggests a form of coincidence, Thorne dismissed. Random neural firing as the sedatives take effect. Make a note for tomorrow's session. We'll need stronger doses. As the children's lights faded to barely perceptible glows, Zara saw something that would haunt her dreams. Despite their sedated state, both beings turned their heads, impossibly simultaneously, toward her hidden observation point. For one terrible, beautiful moment, she met their eyes. Large, dark, and filled with an intelligence and sadness that struck her soul like lightning. They knew she was there, they knew she was watching. And in that moment of connection, Zara understood with crystal clarity that these weren't dangerous specimens to be studied and contained. They were prisoners, 2 innocent children, alone and afraid, trapped in glass cages by humans who refused to see their humanity. Zara pressed her hand against the cold observation window, her heart breaking as the sedatives finally claimed the children and their lights went dark. She would not let this continue. The language of light. 3 weeks passed before Zara found another opportunity to return to the observation corridor. She'd spent every off-duty hour researching everything she could about the Kepler specimens, but official records were frustratingly sparse. The beings had been discovered in stasis pods aboard a derelict vessel, their ship's logs written in an undecipherable script. No mention of their apparent youth, their obvious intelligence, or the fact that they seemed to be communicating with each other. The children had grown more animated since her last visit. Dr. Thorne had apparently reduced the sedative doses after they stopped responding to external stimuli entirely, even pain. Zara watched through the reinforced glass as the two beings floated in their respective pods, their bioluminescent displays more active than before. But it wasn't random. She was certain now. The older child, she'd started thinking of them as siblings based on their synchronized behaviors, would pulse a complex pattern of blues and greens. After a pause, the younger would respond with different colors and rhythms. It was definitely a conversation, though what they were discussing remained a mystery. Dr. Reeves entered the chamber below, running her usual battery of tests. She drew blood samples, took tissue scrapings, and subjected the children to various electromagnetic frequencies, recording their reactions. Throughout the ordeal, the beings never broke their light-based dialogue, though their patterns grew. Increasingly agitated, when Reeves activated a particularly powerful scanner, both children suddenly flared brilliant white. The laboratory equipment sparked and several monitors went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in as Reeves stumbled backward, shielding her eyes from the intense luminescence. "Control to Lab 7. A voice crackled through the communication system. "Report your status immediately." We're fine," Reeves replied, her voice shaky. "Equipment malfunction." The subjects seemed to have some kind of electromagnetic field generation capability we weren't aware of. Through her concealed position, Zara saw something the cameras couldn't capture. In the split second before the emergency lighting activated, she witnessed the children's synchronized flare create a reflection pattern on the pod walls, geometric shapes and lines that lasted only an instant before fading. It looked like a map. That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She kept sketching what she'd seen, trying to recreate the brief image burned into her retinas. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that the children were trying to communicate beyond their light conversations. They were creating visual messages, possibly trying to show something important to anyone who might be watching. She made a decision that would change everything. Using her maintenance access, Zara began visiting the observation corridor during her scheduled rounds. She started small, flashing her work light in simple patterns, hoping to get their attention. The first few attempts yielded nothing. But on the fourth night, something incredible happened. The older child noticed her light signals and responded. With a gentle pulse of green, when Zara flashed twice, the child pulsed twice. 3 flashes, 3 pulses. They were acknowledging her signals, proving they understood this was intentional communication. Within a week, they'd established basic mathematics, counting, addition, subtraction. The children were remarkably quick learners, picking up each new concept faster than Zara could introduce them. Soon they moved to simple binary concepts. Yes, no questions represented by different colored pulses. "Are you prisoners?" Zara flashed one night, using the pattern they'd established for questions. Both children flared bright blue, their signal for yes. "Are you children?" Blue again. "Are you afraid?" The longest, brightest blue pulse yet, accompanied by what looked unmistakably like tears floating in their containment gel. Zara pressed her hand against the observation window, her heart breaking anew. "I'm going to help you," she whispered, though she had no idea how. The children seemed to sense her intention. Both began pulsing in gentle, warm patterns, yellows and soft greens that somehow conveyed gratitude and hope. For the first time since their imprisonment began, they weren't alone. The weight of truth, Zara's clandestine conversations with the children, had evolved into something resembling a functional communication system. Through patient trial and error, they'd developed a basic vocabulary of light patterns, emotions, simple concepts, even primitive stories. The older child, whom Zara had started calling First Light in her mind, had begun teaching the younger, Gentle Glow, more complex patterns, suggesting they had their own educational traditions. But the more she learned about them, the more horrified Zara became at their treatment. During one particularly brutal testing session, Dr. Thorne subjected both children to what he called stress response evaluation. Electric currents, temperature extremes, and sensory deprivation were applied while monitoring their biological reactions. Through it all, the children maintained their light conversations, comforting each other through patterns that now seemed hauntingly beautiful to Zara's trained eye. "Fascinating," Thorne remarked to Dr. Reeves as First Light's bioluminescence flared protectively when gentle glow showed signs of distress. The older specimen consistently prioritizes the younger one's well-being, some kind of pack-bonding behavior. "Perhaps, Dr. Thorne," Reeves said carefully, "don't you think it's possible they're siblings? Family units are common across intelligent species. Maybe we should consider adjusting our research protocols to account for their obvious emotional connection." Thorne's expression hardened. "Dr. Reeves, I'll remind you that emotional anthropomorphization of test subjects is a critical error in xenobiological research. These beings pose a documented threat to human settlements. Their ship was found drifting near 3 destroyed. In colonies, whatever they are, they're not human children, and treating them as such could prove catastrophic." Zara nearly gasped aloud. Destroyed colonies. That changed everything. But as she watched the children's gentle interactions, their protective instincts toward each other, their obvious intelligence and emotional depth, she couldn't reconcile Thorne's claims with reality. That night, she asked them directly. Using their established patterns, she managed to convey the concept of harm, of violence toward other beings. "Did you hurt other people?" Both children flared in what she'd learned was their deepest expression of confusion and distress, rapid, chaotic patterns of red and orange. First Light began an elaborate sequence that seemed to tell a story. Peaceful pulses suddenly interrupted by harsh, aggressive flashes representing others, followed by patterns of fear and running. They weren't the aggressors. They were refugees. The next day, Zara did something that violated every protocol she'd signed. She accessed the classified research files on her supervisor's terminal during his lunch break. What she found made her physically ill. The children's ship had indeed been found near destroyed colonies, but not as perpetrators. They were survivors. The colonies had been attacked by something else, something the reports vaguely described as hostile entities of unknown origin. The children's ship appeared to be an escape pod, its stasis systems failing when human salvage crews found it. More damning were the psychological evaluation reports Dr. Reeves had filed, and that Dr. Thorne had repeatedly suppressed. The children showed all signs of severe trauma, consistent with having witnessed extreme violence. Their protective behaviors toward each other, their obvious intelligence, and their attempts to communicate had all been documented and ignored. The final entry made Zara's blood run cold. Transfer orders. The children were being moved to a military research facility in 3 days, where they would be subjected to enhanced interrogation and weapons potential evaluation. They were going to be tortured. That night, Zara arrived at the observation corridor with more than just communication in mind. She'd spent hours studying the facility schematics, the security rotations, and the containment pod specifications. The children seemed to sense her distress immediately, their patterns shifting to concerned, questioning hues. "They're moving you," she signaled. "Hurt, much hurt." Both children's lights dimmed to almost nothing, their expression of despair. "I help," Zara flashed urgently. "I break glass, you free." First, light suddenly blazed brilliant white, then began a complex sequence unlike anything Zara had seen before. Geometric patterns, mathematical relationships, what looked like star charts. Gentle glow joined in, their combined display creating intricate 3-dimensional images in the space between. Their pods, they were showing her something crucial. Their home, their people. A peaceful civilization that had been destroyed by something terrible, leaving only refugee children drifting in the void until humans found them. When the display faded, both children pulsed the same simple message over and over. Please, please, please. Zara wiped tears from her eyes and pressed both hands against the observation window. In 3 days, these innocent beings would disappear into a military black site, never to be seen again. Not if she could. Help it? Breaking point. The facility's emergency klaxons shattered the pre-dawn silence as Zara made her move. She'd spent 2 sleepless days planning every detail, using her maintenance access to disable key security systems and create diversions throughout the station. A malfunction in the reactor cooling system had drawn most of the security team to the opposite end of the complex, while convenient power fluctuations had temporarily blinded several surveillance networks. In the chaos, nobody noticed one maintenance worker heading toward the restricted levels with an industrial plasma cutter. The children were waiting for her. Both had been exhibiting unusual agitation for hours, their bioluminescent patterns chaotic and urgent. When Zara appeared at the observation window, their lights immediately synchronized into what she now recognized as expressions of desperate hope. Ready? She signaled through the reinforced glass. Twin pulses of determined blue answered her. Zara descended into the containment chamber through an emergency access shaft, her heart hammering against her ribs. The pods were larger up close, they're transparent. Aluminum construction, designed to contain beings far more dangerous than the children floating within. Each pod was supported by a complex network of life support systems, monitoring equipment, and, most importantly, locking mechanisms that required dual-key authorization to open. She didn't have dual-key authorization, but she had something. Better, an industrial-grade plasma cutter and 30 years of experience bypassing tamper-proof systems. The first pod's locking mechanism yielded to the plasma torch in under 2 minutes. As the containment seal broke with a soft hiss, the blue gel began draining through emergency ports. First Light's eyes opened immediately, their dark gaze meeting Zara's with an intensity that took her breath away. But when she reached toward the pod's interior, the child recoiled, their lights flashing in rapid warning patterns. Of course, after years of imprisonment and medical procedures, they would fear any human touch. Zara slowly withdrew her hands and began signaling through their established light language. Friend, she pulsed with her work light. Help, safe. First Light studied her for a long moment, then slowly extended one delicate hand toward the pod's edge. The moment they made contact with open air, their bioluminescence flared brilliantly, and something extraordinary happened. Zara felt it like a gentle pressure inside her mind, not invasive or threatening, but warm and questioning. Images flashed through her consciousness, her own memories of watching the children, her horror at their treatment, her desperate need to help them. It lasted only seconds, but when it ended, First Light's expression had transformed into something approaching trust. They were telepathic, or at least empathic enough to sense genuine intention. Working together now, Zara helped First Light from their pod, while simultaneously cutting through the second containment system. The child was weak from years of confinement, their movements shaky, but they immediately moved toward their sibling's pod with determination that made Zara's chest tight with emotion. Gentle Glow's release was more traumatic. The younger child had been more heavily sedated, their responses sluggish and confused, but the moment First Light touched their sibling's hand, both children blazed with shared light, and Gentle Glow's eyes snapped open with sudden clarity. No reunion was heartbreaking and beautiful. The siblings embraced with desperate intensity, their combined bioluminescence creating patterns of such complexity and emotion that Zara found herself crying without realizing it. In their light language, She could read pure joy, relief, love, and gratitude directed toward her, but their escape was far from over. "Security breach in Laboratory 7. Dr. Thorne's voice echoed through the facility's communication system. "Containment compromised. All personnel to emergency stations." Zara helped both children toward the emergency access shaft. But first, lights suddenly stopped, their lights flashing urgently. They gestured toward the laboratory's computer terminals, then began a rapid sequence of light patterns. They wanted to access the computers, to retrieve something. "No time," Zara started to say, but First Light's expression was so determined, so desperate, that she hesitated. What could be so important? Moving to the nearest terminal, she quickly accessed the facility's data systems. With her maintenance credentials, First Light approached the screen, their hands hovering just above the surface. Their bioluminescence shifted to specific patterns, and impossibly, the computer began responding to their light commands. Data streams flowed across the screen, research files, communication logs, and most importantly, stellar navigation charts. The children weren't just retrieving information, they were downloading everything related to their species, their capture, and the destroyed colonies. Evidence. They were gathering evidence. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridors above. Security was closing in, but First Light continued their work with methodical precision, copying files to a portable storage device Zara had brought for facility maintenance. "Please," Zara whispered urgently. "We have to go." Gentle glow tugged at their sibling's arm, adding their own urgent light patterns to Zara's plea. Finally, First Light completed their task and stepped back from the terminal. The stored data represented proof of everything: the children's innocence, the cover-up, the plan to weaponize them. As they climbed toward the emergency access shaft, both children suddenly stopped and turned back toward Zara. Their combined light display was unlike anything she'd witnessed. Geometric patterns that seemed to shift and dance in the air between them, creating three-dimensional images of breathtaking beauty. It was a gift, a message, a promise, and then they placed their hands on her arms, and the world exploded into shared consciousness. The bridge between worlds, the moment the children touched Zara's skin, reality shifted. She found herself experiencing not just their memories, but their entire emotional landscape. Years of fear and isolation, the trauma of witnessing their world's destruction, the desperate hope that someday someone would understand they meant no harm. But beneath the pain was something extraordinary, a healing light that began flowing through her body, repairing damage she hadn't even realized she carried. Old injuries from her maintenance work vanished, chronic pain disappeared. Even deeper, wounds, the emotional scars from a lifetime of feeling overlooked and insignificant, began to mend. But more than healing, she felt their gift of true understanding. Language became unnecessary as concepts flowed directly between minds. "We are," and called the Lumen, came First Light's mental voice, gentle and clear. "I am Kethara, guardian of the small light. This is my birth sibling, Nean." "Thank you," whispered Nean, their consciousness young but wise beyond their apparent years. "You saw us when others could not." Through their shared connection, Zara understood everything. The Lumen were a peaceful species of natural healers and empaths. Their bioluminescent abilities evolved to share emotions and knowledge directly. Their homeworld had been attacked by entities they called the Void Seekers, beings of pure aggression that consumed light and life wherever they found it. Kethara and Nean were among the last survivors, children when their evacuation ships' stasis systems failed and left them drifting until human salvagers found them. The destroyed colonies near their crash site had fallen to the same Void Seekers who had followed the refugee ships. "Your people fear us because we were found near death," Kethara explained. "But we are not the darkness. We are what remains of the light, The connection was interrupted by plasma torch sounds, cutting through the emergency access shaft above them. Security had found their escape route. "Down here!" shouted a voice Zara recognized as Commander Hayes, the station's military liaison. "3 heat signatures in Laboratory 7. Zara's mind raced. The main corridors would be flooded with security. Impersonnel. But her years of maintenance work had given her knowledge of every service tunnel and forgotten passage in the facility. There was one route that might work. The old mining shafts that connected to the original survey stations. They'd been sealed for safety reasons, but she had the codes. "I know another way," she whispered, leading the children toward a concealed maintenance hatch. "But it's dangerous. The passages are partially collapsed." Kethara and Nayan exchanged rapid light patterns, their decision quick. "We trust you," came their unified mental response. The journey through the abandoned mining tunnels was harrowing. Ancient support beams groaned under decades of neglect, and more than once they had to crawl through spaces barely wide enough for human shoulders. The children, weakened by years of confinement, struggled with the physical demands, but their shared healing abilities kept them moving. As they neared the old survey station, Zara's portable communicator crackled to life. "All personnel, be advised," came Dr. Thorne's voice. "The escaped specimens are extremely dangerous. They may have infected maintenance worker Volkov with unknown pathogens or parasitic organisms. She is to be considered compromised and potentially hostile." The children's lights dimmed with shame and fear. "They will make you an enemy because you helped us," Kethara said sadly. "Let them try," Zara replied aloud, surprising herself with her vehemence. "What they've done to you, what they plan to do, it's monstrous. The whole galaxy needs to know the truth." At the survey station, Zara activated the emergency beacon system. The signal would reach nearby shipping lanes within hours, and the data storage device containing evidence of the children's treatment would be transmitted automatically to multiple destinations, including the Colonial Ethics Committee and the Interstellar Peace Council. But their sanctuary was short-lived. The station's external cameras showed vehicles approaching from the main facility, military transports carrying armed personnel in hazmat suits. "They're treating this like a xenobiological contamination event," Zara realized. "They'll use lethal force to contain the infection." The children moved to the station's observation windows, their hands pressed against the transparent aluminum as they gazed up at the alien stars. Their lights began pulsing in complex, beautiful patterns, not communication this time, but something that looked almost like prayer. "What are you doing?" Zara asked. "Calling," Nayan replied simply. "There are others, scattered survivors hiding. In the dark between stars, we sing to them now, tell them there is hope, that not all light has gone out." Through their shared connection, Zara felt it, a network of consciousness spreading outward at impossible speeds, touching minds she couldn't comprehend. Dozens, then hundreds of responses flickered back like distant candles in cosmic darkness. The children weren't just prisoners or refugees. They were the keystone of their species' survival, the living link that could reunite the scattered remnants of Lumen civilization. The military transports had reached the survey station. Commander Hayes' voice boomed through external speakers. "Maintenance worker Volkov, you are ordered to surrender the specimens immediately. You have 30 seconds to comply before we breach the facility." Zara looked at the children, Kethara and Nayan, not specimens, but individuals with names, hopes, and an entire species depending on them. Their lights pulsed gently, resigned to whatever fate awaited them. But Zara wasn't resigned. She was angry. Activating the station's external communication system, she broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Zara Volkov, at Research Station Kepler 442b. I'm transmitting evidence of gross violations of interstellar law, including the imprisonment and torture of refugee children. The beings in my protection are not enemies. They're survivors of genocide, and they possess healing abilities that could benefit all species." As if to prove her point, Keth-Ara and Na'an stepped into the broadcast. Range, their bioluminescent displays creating a light show of impossible beauty. Through the connection, Zara felt their message radiating outward, not words but pure intention, peace, healing, hope, understanding. The effect was immediate. Communications flooded in from ships throughout the system, from colony worlds, from species Zara had never heard of. The children's light song had touched more than just their own kind. It had awakened something universal. Commander Hayes' voice returned, but the certainty was gone. "Volkov, what exactly are those things doing?" Through the observation windows, Zara could see the military personnel lowering their weapons. Their faces turned upward in wonder as the children's lights painted the dark moon sky with messages of peace. "In a dozen alien languages, the bridge between worlds," Keth-Ara said softly. "It begins with one person choosing to see past their fear." For the first time in years, Zara smiled without reservation. The children were safe, the truth was spreading, and in a galaxy too often divided by fear and misunderstanding, too small. Lights had begun to heal the darkness between stars. The glass prison had held 2 alien children, but it could not contain hope.